Alright, guys, I'm back with another chapter in Psalms. We're in chapter 29. Again, the header reads God reveals his great power in nature. We can trust God to give us both the peace and the strength to weather the storms of life. And the storms are many, guys, I promise you that. But here we go, we're going to get right into chapter 29. Honor the Lord, you heavenly beings. Honor the Lord for his glory and strength. Honor the Lord for the glory of his name. Worship the Lord in the splendor of his holiness. The voice of the Lord echoes above the sea. The God of glory thunders. The Lord thunders over the mighty sea. The voice of the Lord is powerful. The voice of the Lord is majestic. The voice of the Lord splits the mighty cedars. The Lord shatters the cedars of Lebanon. He makes Lebanon's mountains skip like a calf. He makes Mount Hermon leap like a young wild ox. The voice of the Lord strikes with bolts of lightning. The voice of the Lord makes the barren wilderness quake. The Lord shakes the wilderness of Kadesh. The voice of the Lord twists mighty oaks and strips the forest bare. In his temple, everyone shouts glory. The Lord rules over the flood. The Lord rules over the floodwaters. The Lord reigns as king forever. The Lord gives his people strength. The Lord blesses them with peace. So, being so close to some natural disasters as we have recently, in my area, it was a couple of tornadoes that were in just a couple weeks ago. Actually knocked the power out here for almost a whole week, and we didn't have internet for a while. And having children that are homeschoolers, that was pretty detrimental to us. It made it for a very, very, very long week, especially for my wife. And so that definitely was not ideal. But it's all definitely so amazing to see God and how he works. I mean, just the power of the wind and the renewal that storms bring, as far as, the rain that the area needs. I live in southern Michigan, so we can never get enough rain. Sometimes we get a little too much, but it's always put to good use. And then there's so much that is created from the natural moaning and groaning of our earth that it's so impressive to see how it's all been put to purpose. And so when it mentions the things of the mighty seas and the mountains and the wilderness in this passage, I can't help but think just of the simple things that I've seen in my own life. The thunderstorms and the rains, and how, sometimes people don't like the bad weather, but oftentimes what happens following that weather is just the gift of life. How many people are fed by the rains? How many people are fed by the bad storms that come? Now, don't get me wrong. There are sometimes plenty of victims in these terrible storms and the tough things that life can bring, even in natural disasters, like physical things that are brought upon by life. It's still so amazing to me. Another thing is, I used to live out in Washington, the state, not D.C., and I was blown away by wildfires. Very scary, very awe-inspiring events that happen in nature. But it's so amazing to me how God spoke these things into existence and how they create new life. It simply is taking care of what needs to be taken care of and bringing about new life. That's how forests clear themselves for new generations to come along, and it's super impressive to see how it's done. Now, I will say this, can be very, very, very dangerous for man-made structures and things that are built in a way that nature doesn't really support them. We've created them and we put them in these places that are kind of out of sorts when it comes to nature. And so when nature moans and groans like it will, like God intended it, sometimes it can be very dangerous for people. Mudslides and wildfires, like I mentioned, and those are all designed to bring about balance. And sometimes in our pursuit of our own balance, we make things a little bit more dangerous for ourselves than need be. And obviously, prayers always go out to anyone enduring any type of natural disaster. But sometimes in those places, that's God's intent. We know those things happen in those places specifically. And so it's super interesting when we see them happen in the manner that they do. Other than that, I'm just super impressed by a God that controls all of that. And we've seen it in a couple other passages where, Jesus rebukes the storm, or Jonah throws himself over, or has himself thrown over the side of a boat and swallowed by a whale to calm the sea. All these things are just acts of God's greatness. And they're super inspiring, because if he can control those physical storms in our lives that are so big and so powerful, then he can control the little storms in my life. And I take great comfort in that. But on that note, have a good night. God bless, guys. I love you. Jesus loves you. And I will see you tomorrow for chapter 30, where it reads, A celebration of God's deliverance. Earthly security is uncertain, but God is always faithful. Have a good night, guys. I'll see you tomorrow.